Listen, I understand. This video topic is a bit out of the blue, even for me. See, this video is releasing real close to the birthday of one of my best buddies, YouTube extraordinaire, Stripe the Squid. See, Stripe's channel is essentially this mission to review as many different cartoons as the physical form will allow, which makes it all the more interesting that when doing a video on his favorite animes a few years back, despite having seen things like Jujutsu Kaisen, Mob Psycho 100, Steins Gate, and Kaguya-sama, he put his favorite anime of all time as, well, Hitori Bocchi, which is an anime I truly would not even be aware of if not for him, with the only real explanation I've heard as to why it's his favorite being that the titular character Hitori Bocchi is literally just him. So as a bit of a celebration towards not only one of the nicest people I've ever met, but the guy who inspired me to make the jump into content creation, I mean seriously, one of my main goals as a YouTuber is to be able to consistently make videos as good as his. So I've decided to review Hitori Bocchi to find out if Stripe has discovered a hidden gem, or if maybe his brain's been broken from watching too much Sheep in the Big City. So what is Hitori Bocchi? This is perhaps the most loaded question I have ever asked, and perhaps ever will ask. The creator of the original Hitori Bocchi manga, which I should technically be calling Hitori Bocchi no Mamoru Saikatsu, but that's a mouthful, so we're sticking with just Hitori Bocchi. I did not read the manga for this video, though I might read it casually on my own time later, and apparently there's very little information on the mangaka. Their name is Katsuo, and they've written some other stuff too, none of which I've heard of before. The anime was produced by C2C, which is an anime company I've never heard of before, and nothing they've made sounds familiar to me. Luckily for us, since Hitori Bocchi's origins isn't too in-depth, we can head right into talking about the anime itself. Basically, the anime is about the titular Hitori Bocchi as she tries to befriend everyone in her class. Each episode goes over different minor social struggles as the core cast of the show slowly but surely expands, with the whole show doing its best to be as sweet and wholesome as possible. So that's the basic gist of it. But come on, you know I gotta dive a little bit deeper than that. We gotta analyze each of the 12 episodes and each of the main characters until I can finally truly understand Hitori Bocchi. Spoiler alert for the entire show, but I also think it's a show that can be watched in spite of spoilers. The first episode is about Hitori Bocchi at her worst, in total despair over the start of middle school because of her extreme social anxiety, which interestingly enough, the show never gives a reason for. She's just sort of like that, though I don't mind that at all. If anything, it helps her come across as more of a relatable character. Her main goal for the start of the episode isn't to try and make friends though, it's to come across a legal loophole. See, the reason Bocchi is trying to befriend everyone in her class is because her one elementary school friend told her the only way she and Bocchi can become friends again is if Bocchi makes friends with everyone in her middle school class. So Bocchi immediately tries to find a way to become the only person in her middle school class, because she fully believes herself incapable of making any friends. There's a moment during this that's very telling of where the show is going overall, where Bocchi puts a paper on her classroom door, Class 1-1, that says that the class is being demolished, in order to persuade everyone from not going in. She immediately freaks out after doing this and starts to worry that she just committed a crime. Of course, nobody believes the paper, but they all find it really funny and carry on with her day. Bocchi does a thing, or tries to do a thing, worries that doing the thing will result in the end of the world, and then people either don't care about what she did or actively enjoy it. This will be a reoccurring pattern throughout the rest of the 12 episodes. I mean, it's a core part of the series' main comedy to see Bocchi freak out, but it's also a core part of the series' main message that her freaks out are ill-placed and people just genuinely appreciate her presence. She's also a huge planner. She hardly does anything without thinking about doing it at least a few times beforehand. She wrote whole schemes on how to prevent having classmates. Later on in the episode, she even writes a whole potential conversation on her arm with branching dialogue paths, and freaks out when the conversation leads to a place she didn't write. It's just important to note that Bocchi has quirks beyond just the social anxiety, but for right now, that's the most overwhelmingly obvious part of her character. Still, since the demolition papers didn't work, she goes into class and decides she'll just actually try her best to make a friend. She then immediately barfs upon having to introduce herself to the class. Still, She perseveres, so she decides to try and talk to the girl in front of her, Nako Suno. It goes poorly, as you'd expect, but see, Nako is probably the most socially intelligent character in the series, and quickly realizes Hitori would make for a good friend. So after a few awkward scenarios, the two eventually exchange contact information, which is beneficial in the beginning, as Nako is usually on her phone anyways, and Bocchi seems to be doing a bit better with the buffer of being able to talk but not face to face. Eventually, the excess texting runs its course, mostly due to Bocchi accidentally running into things while texting. Still, Bocchi and Nako make a genuine bond, and Bocchi even gathers up the strength to ask Nako to be her friend by the end of the episode, even though Nako already thought that they were friends, which is a nice moment. It is a real decent episode. It sets up not only the main conflict, but Hitori Bocchi herself. And even beyond the setups, the gags are decent, the moments are cute, and the episode ends with Bocchi walking home with Nako, which is a really nice moment that feels earned. But who cares about any of that crap? We got an OP and ED to talk about. I really like the OP. Reviewing music is not my strong suit, and I genuinely have no clue what the lyrics are, but the song, at least in vibes, very much suits the tone of the show. It's fun, it's catchy, it's a genuine bop. The animation for the OP follows suit. It's sort of standard, they even do the thing with the two characters standing with their backs to one another. The animation focuses a lot on showing the different personalities of the characters, and it does that very well. It's also one of the most notable inclusions of the Promise Fairy, the sort of mascot for the show. It's this toy of a chubby, shirtless old man that represents Bocchi's promise to Kai, her original friend from elementary school. The ED is similar. It's a nice, cutesy song, though the animation is a lot more plain. Just Bocchi and her friends walking in a weird, nebulous realm that is a colorful background. There's also some panels from the original manga too, which is a nice touch. There's not a lot of extra detail I can go into. Again, I don't know a lick of any of the lyrics, but on vibes alone, I'd give the OP a solid 9 out of 10 and the ED an 8 out of 10. So, episode 2. It's a good one. There is less focus on Bocchi this time, and more focus on Nako and a new girl, Aru Honshu. The episode starts with Bocchi accidentally making Nako mad. So, local problem solver, class vice president Aru steps in to help Bocchi figure out what she did wrong and apologize. Since Bocchi is truly clueless, she recounts her last few days of interactions with Nako, much to Aru's slight dismay. This leads to the main chunk of the episode, which is just Bocchi and Nako hanging out, exploring the school, and talking. So let's talk a little about Nako. Nako is the first friend Bocchi makes in the series and is sort of her opposite in a lot of ways. She cares a lot less about what people think of her, just generally doing her own thing. She's also the most socially intelligent of all the friends Bocchi will make, which while she will use this to help Bocchi out on her quest to befriend the class, she mainly just uses it in order to lightly tease others for her own amusement. In a lot of ways, she fits this sort of big sister role of the series. I mean, she's literally the tallest of the bunch, which really helps her character work well off the other personalities. The show constantly hints that there's more to her character, but clearly intended to extrapolate that idea in a season 2 that never came to be, but she really helps bring out either the best and or funniest of the others. You know, I was thinking about this. If Stripe is Bocchi, I wonder if, since I'm also on my phone a lot, I enjoy an ethical tease from time to time, and I often find myself in more supportive roles, I might be the Nako. Or at least that's how I'm going to choose to interpret reality, even though only 2 videos ago I wrote what is arguably the most Bocchi-coded script I possibly could have, despite not having seen the show by the time I was writing that. Still, Nako and Bocchi have problems. Eventually it's revealed that Nako got a bit upset at Bocchi because Bocchi revealed her promise to Kai about befriending everyone in class, and it makes Nako feel a lot less special. She eventually gets over it though, especially after Bocchi makes it incredibly clear that she does actually like being friends with Nako, beyond all that promise stuff. Nako even helps Bocchi become friends with Aru after the two accidentally discover that Aru is unfortunate, which means despite the fact that she really cares about her appearance, both literally and figuratively, she's prone to messing up and somehow really bad at dressing herself. Like in this instance, she came into school with the hanger still on her shirt. I don't even know how someone could pull that off. Still, Bocchi, with the help of Nako, convinces Aru to become friends with them. And the episode ends with Bocchi passing out after being so excited by the prospect of a new friend. This episode is a good way of showing that while yes, the main plot does move forward through making new friends, the story isn't going to forget the friends friends that Bocchi does make, and the slow building of the different dynamics is a part of what makes the show keep feeling fresh. See, Bocchi makes for a good friend, as others, especially Aru, find it easy to be themselves around her. And with Nako especially, it seems like she just likes having Bocchi around to keep life exciting, considering all the antics Bocchi gets up to. Meanwhile, Nako and Aru eventually develop their own dynamic. While they are friends, they often sort of act antagonistic to one another, usually because Nako teases Aru and then Aru retaliates. I mean, it's not the most fleshed out dynamic friendship in history, it's not trying to be, but the fact that the show cares to add extra non-Bocchi related dynamics really does help elevate the show. Episode 3 explores the Nako and Aru dynamic a lot further. Bocchi is surprisingly not much in this episode. She even gets sick halfway through, which leads to a gag about her worrying that she's going to be forgotten. Bocchi and Nako even hang out over the weekend, until Bocchi gets sick, that is. Nako also has her own little subplot, and it's that apparently she looks like a delinquent. Now, I know there's a bit of a cultural barrier. After all, I'm from the US. I do not know a great deal about Japanese middle schools, beyond the fact that they exist, and sometimes the kids there have great amounts of psychic powers that they use to help exorcise ghosts. Still, I have no idea why the characters keep saying Nako looks threatening. Sure, she doesn't smile much, but I feel like that's fairly normal. There's a scene where some kids get a bit frightened of her, but those are kids, that's understandable. What really weirds me out is the teacher. She is so constantly frightened of Nako that it goes from the show's usual quirkiness to feeling almost sort of mean, which is just absolutely not the vibe the show was going for. The teacher basically talks to Nako like she's the head honcho of the Yakuza or something. Meanwhile, Nako literally hasn't done a single thing to her. There's a scene in this episode where she runs away from Nako while Nako was just trying to be helpful. It almost feels like the teacher is bullying her, because apparently Nako doesn't smile enough, which just goes to show that the teacher absolutely would not be able to keep her sanity in an American high school, though I guess that isn't exactly a flex. It's not a big aspect of the show, but in most episodes there's a joke or two about it, and it's probably what I would say is the biggest flaw in the show's story. I mean, again, it isn't huge. It's a joke that goes from mild grievance at best to slightly annoying at worst. Still, there's a scene at the end where Nako talks to Aru about it as the two walk home, and while Aru's advice is literally just to smile more, it's a nice change of pace to have a few scenes without Bocchi every once in a while. Though I say that out of it making the friend group feel more fleshed out, not out of any sort of dislike of Bocchi. Though this episode still gets its fair share of Bocchi moments, especially with the reveal that her serious outfit is just opera pajamas, which of course firmly places Hitori Bocchi in the Serial Experiments Lane universe. Next is episode 4, which is the introduction to Sotoko Rikita. The episode starts with Bocchi sneaking around the neighborhood, which is just this unnamed suburban area, as she tries to get to school, but it turns out one of her classmates was secretly watching her do this, that of course being Sotoka. Sotoka approaches Bocchi about her behavior, much to the predictable dismay of Bocchi. Sotoka takes it a step further than thinking Bocchi is just a shy girl. No, Sotoka fully believes that Bocchi is, in fact, a ninja. See, all the different members of the Bocchi gang fall under different archetypes. Bocchi is the shy one, Nako is the reserved one, Aru is the popular one, and Sotoka is the weird kid. First off, she's a foreigner. It never says from where, but it's either the US or Europe, so nobody really knows her, even though people occasionally talk about her behind her back. Sotoka is just a weird kid who kind of looks like Sailor Moon. She's apparently really obsessed with ninjas and wants to become one. This is why she takes an immediate interest in Bocchi and her apparent mastery of the ninja arts or something. Bocchi, of course, has no idea how to handle the situation. She tells Sotoka that she isn't a ninja, but Sotoka doesn't believe her, insisting Bocchi must become her master. Bocchi initially does not want to do this, but after realizing how alone Sotoka is and reading up on how to become a ninja, Bocchi decides to actually teach Sotoka. It's a good episode, as Sotoka is arguably the funniest of the main cast. Sure, she's weird, but she's so earnestly weird that it becomes endearing to watch. She also immediately helps bring out the sillier sides of both Bocchi and Aru, leading to them having some good moments because of her. This also helps Nako double down on her role as the straight man, if you will, of the Bocchi gang. Sotoka is the last notable character, at least for a while. So now that the show's main cast is all fully established, its comedic potential has also been fully firmly established. Hitori Bocchi isn't exactly a laugh out loud type of show. Each episode I maybe had a quick laugh, maybe once, sometimes twice per episode, but it's more one of those types of comedies where it's just nice hearing the jokes. The point of the show is to see these kids use their friendship with one another to get over social hardships, like loneliness and having too many expectations on themselves. So to see them joke around with each other, while I'm not audibly laughing, I still find the jokes endearing. Even the repeat jokes. Like, if I had $1 for every time Nako called Aru unfortunate, I'd have enough money to commission a second season of the show. But it also feels true to the kind of repeat joke an actual friend group would have, so it's still very much welcome, and there is enough variations on the joke to never get too stale. Speaking on the Nako-Aru dynamic, episode 5 goes a lot more into Aru's side of it as she takes center stage in this episode. The plot gets rolling when Aru accidentally wears an elementary outfit to school instead of a middle school one, though she's lucky as she was able to play it off as a joke, which she was able to do with just how much Nako was laughing about the whole ordeal. Still, the laughing and teasing really does seem to get to Aru, even if she does consider Nako a friend, so she challenges Nako to a tennis match. Despite being on the tennis team, it seems Aru is just as bad as Nako at tennis. So really all Nako has to do to win is quote-unquote let Aru keep serving. Still, Aru eventually hits the serve and wins a point, though she does concede that Nako wins, having learned a valuable lesson that while she isn't quite where she wants to be yet, she still has the ability to put the work in, and slowly but surely become the qualified person that she wants to be. And this is a great example of a scene where spoilers really don't matter too much from this video, because if you watch the scene, it's way funnier than I'm making it out to be. I really think this is one of the better scenes in the entire show, of just how the character dynamics work. I really like this episode. The tennis match is a lot of fun, as due to the absolute lack of skills on either end, it accidentally becomes more of a social mind game than an actual tennis match. The extra spotlight on Aru is also appreciated. Aru is a really fun character. Possibly my favorite of the Bocchi gang, but honestly, settling on a favorite character isn't really something I feel like doing. Still, Aru's desire to be constantly on top of her A game, whilst being incredibly unfortunate, is both relatable and funny. She also has this running gag where she keeps doing Aru beams at people. It started last episode where she does a ninja beam at Sodoka, and something about the gag just gets me. It also makes a lot of sense as to why she's friends with the Bocchi gang. They all see her for how she is, so she can let herself be herself around them. There's some lines early on in the show about how her smile is fake, but that doesn't seem to be the case when she's around the Bocchi gang. It's nice. She's also more than willing to return the favor, as she will always step up to help her friends. Also, she has her own song, which even long after I did my watch-throughs for this video, I still occasionally listen to. But back to Bocchi, she's not in this episode much. She watches the tennis match with Sodoka, which is the first real sign of the two acting like friends around each other instead of ninja buddies, so that's nice. Bocchi is actually going to be a side character for a little bit longer, as the next episode, episode 6, is a Nako episode, though it does start off with Bocchi trying to summon herself to be sick to skip the next day of school, which is deeply relatable. Unfortunately though, episode 6 is arguably the start of the kind of noticeable weak point in the middle chunk of the series. Not bad by any means, just a little bit more likely to lean towards meh every now and again. A big reason for that in this episode is, again, the teacher, who just fails to pass the vibe check even harder by starting to believe Nako and Bocchi are part of an evil gang, with Bocchi as the leader, which is a conclusion based purely on how her hearing Sodoka call Bocchi master once, because she has no idea how to interact with any of her students. She was even kind of mean to Bocchi this episode by forcing her to say a haiku in front of the class, even though it's clear as day that doing so is going to make Bocchi literally throw up. It doesn't even seem like she's trying to push Bocchi to become better or anything like that. She just seems totally unaware of Bocchi's social anxiety somehow. It's funny when the kids are socially unaware, but it just feels weird and kind of sad when it's the adult being clueless. So she keeps being mean to Nako by calling Nako scary to her face, and now she's being mean to Bocchi. In other shows, I could see the joke of a teacher who's a complete failure working better, but man, it's just not the vibe in this show. I do enjoy the Nako section of this episode. Nako failed a math test and has to take a remedial class, so Bocchi helps her study. It's about Bocchi realizing how, while Nako is super helpful and kind, because of her relaxed attitude, she doesn't really receive that much help. So Bocchi takes it upon herself to help Nako out as much as she can. The two also start this bit where they keep going "Wah ha ha," which is a phrase that almost sort of symbolizes Nako's friendship with Bocchi, leading Nako to go "Wah ha ha" during remedial class as a sort of reminder that she's got to lock in school-wise in order to spend time with Bocchi, culminating in a special "Wah ha ha" ED song, which I actually kind of prefer. The usual ED is arguably a better song, but this one feels a lot more in spirits of Hitori Bocchi, which is nice as, besides the OP and Aru song, not a lot of the music in Bocchi is very standout. It's just sort of plain music that could fit in any slice of life anime, which is fine. You got the other Bocchi anime for tunes. So, episode 7. It's the pool episode. Thank goodness it's not that sort of anime. The pool section is also just kind of boring. Early on in the episode, Bocchi realizes she's behind schedule on her promise to Kai, and that makes her sad. But then she and the Bocchi gang go to the pool, and Bocchi tries to teach Nako how to swim. Since they just did an episode about Bocchi helping Nako, and in a way better way, this whole section just feels kind of pointless, since it's not even that funny either. Nothing about it is explicitly bad, just kinda meh, though luckily it doesn't last all too long. There's also the ending, which I do quite like. It shows the Bocchi gang at karaoke, in which no actual karaoke happens, and instead Bocchi runs into Kai, which sort of adds to Kai's character, seeing as how she's truly committed to the promise she made to Bocchi, even though she clearly still cares about Bocchi. And Bocchi learns to appreciate the progress she has made, especially because of just how much she cares about the people she's befriended. It's also the start of Sodoka wanting to befriend Bocchi instead of simply being her apprentice. It's a solid ending. I still think this is probably the worst episode of the series. Just the pool bit was a bit boring, and the main issues explored didn't go anywhere interesting. It really is just more Bocchi gang, which is fine. These are good characters, but still. Though the show has a bit of a twist in episode 8. In this episode, Bocchi tries to make friends with Kako Kurai, who is the strict outfit inspector of the class. Bocchi actually tried to befriend her in an earlier episode by taking off her bow, which didn't lead the friendship anywhere, but Kako did lend Bocchi her bow. So this episode, Bocchi has to give back the bow, but she's really bad at it. Eventually, she needs Nako to come help her give back the bow, in which she admits to Kako she purposefully took off the bow in order to be able to chat with Kako. This flusters Kako, but she agrees to have the occasional chat with Bocchi, but with a caveat. She has a rule against having friends. This actually makes it the first episode where Bocchi fails to make a friend, but she is able to figure out why Kako has a rule against making friends. It's some Ayn Rand nonsense about becoming stronger by being alone, but it sets up Kako as a sort of final hurdle for her to overcome. Can Bocchi even make friends with someone who is unfriendly? I mean, probably. There's also a B-plot revolving around Sodoko, which I also quite like, but that story becomes the primary focus in a later episode, so I'll talk about it then. Overall, this episode is another decent one. It's also the start of Bocchi's arc to really try and become emotionally stronger. She's fine with her friends, but in this episode, she starts to realize that isn't exactly enough. And while her friends do clearly make her stronger, she also needs to take a page out of Kako's book to try and find her inner strength. It's good stuff. Episode 9 further extrapolates on this idea, with the episode basically being split into two halves. The first half is Bocchi with a group of classmates she hasn't talked to before. It's a good moment to show that while she's still a total nervous wreck, she is improving, only needing to rely on her friends just a little. Aru also excellently dresses up in a festival outfit in this one, which leads to the weirdest absence in this show I've been wanting to talk about for a while now. How come Kako never calls Aru out on her absolutely abysmal attempts at maintaining dress code? She gets on Bocchi for forgetting her bow once. Meanwhile, Aru is wearing truly whatever. It feels like there's an opportunity for a good joke that's missing, like Kako having completely given up on Aru, or Aru automatically assuming she's done something wrong as soon as Kako gets near her, but the two pretty much just don't interact throughout the show. Either way, Bocchi is growing stronger, so that's nice. But this episode also really explores who Kako is, via an outdoors class where she makes curry with the Bocchi gang. Turns out she's a lot like Bocchi, just with the facade of a grump. She's an overthinker who cares about what people think of her despite what she'll say. But it seems like she really did enjoy her time with the Bocchi gang. She challenges Bocchi to become rivals with her and to see who becomes stronger, Kako by herself or Bocchi with her friends. Of course, if her abilities of introspection were even slightly better, she'd realize Bocchi had already won, but hey, middle schooler, she's allowed to be a bit dim. The show arguably doesn't need a rival character, but Kako is a fun character in her own right, and her personality ends up bouncing off of Bocchi really well, as someone who will actually tell Bocchi off from time to time, while still remaining likable because she's very clearly just in a bit of a phase. Episode 10 is a good contender for my favorite episode of the series. It feels like by this point the show is back to being as consistently good as it was in the first few episodes. It's the big Sotaka episode. See, a few episodes earlier, during the karaoke session, Sotaka starts an internal debate within herself on whether she wants to become Bocchi's friend or apprentice. In this episode though, Sotaka sees Bocchi become friends with two people that she baked with a few episodes ago. Though the two new friends are very much background characters, even if the new friendship does technically progress the main plot. The next day, Sotaka sees Bocchi refer to the two girls with the chan suffix, which is notable because due to the apprenticeship, Bocchi refers to Sotaka with the san suffix, and chan is the suffix a lot more appropriate for friends. This leads to Sotaka realizing that she wants to be friends with Bocchi and not her apprentice. The way it plays out for most of the episode, it sort of parallels a crush. A friend crush, if you will. Viewing it through this lens, it is genuinely really cute the way Sotaka has to ask for Nako and Aru's help to take that step to ask Bocchi to become her friend. And she has a bit of worry as despite Bocchi's promise with Kai, Sotaka is worried about starting the friendship prematurely, as though cutting the apprenticeship short would be rude to Bocchi. Still, Sotaka asks Bocchi to be her friend the same way Bocchi asked Sotaka way back in episode 4, by throwing a paper ninja star at the other so they can unfold the paper and get a message. Bocchi's paper from Sotaka in this episode says something along the lines of, "I like you more than I like ninjas, please be my friend," which, for a show hell-bent on being as wholesome as possible, it says something that this might be the most wholesome scene of the bunch. So the episode focuses on the funniest character, Sotaka, and she is very funny in this episode. Her face when Bocchi refers to the cooking friends with the chan suffix is one of the goofiest in the whole series. I also really like the problem tackled. I remember having a bunch of silly little crushes back in middle school, and this was a sort of fond way to remember all that. And it's nice to see Nako and Aru also work to support Sotaka. Nako and Aru really have become like a cranky old married couple by these later episodes. It's really funny. So sure, things were kind of starting to slog for a bit in the second half of the middle, but this episode really rejuvenated my desire to finish reviewing the show. We got 2 more episodes to go, so let's get to it. The penultimate episode features the final noteworthy character, Mayo Ojusa. Other than Mayo's plot line, there's a little bit of focus in the beginning with Bocchi struggling to greet every single one of her friends, which is a problem I also definitely totally have. Totally. Still, Bocchi is sidelined by the news that classes change every year, so there's a chance she'll get placed into a new class without any of her current friends. So not only does this mess with the Kai promise trademarked, but, well, being separated from all her friends would just kind of suck. Luckily, Bocchi runs into extraordinarily rich girl Mayo Ojusa, who gives Bocchi the idea of simply buying the school. Bocchi seems hesitant as it's an insane idea, but since Mayo is one of her classmates, getting to know her better would be nice. And hey, maybe buying the school would somehow be possible. So Mayo gets Bocchi a part-time job folding cranes, which sort of ends up being Sotaka's job because she's kind of really good at origami. But still, the part-time job doesn't pay enough to buy the school, surprisingly. Mayo reveals that actually the classes don't change every year, and so Bocchi can spend the next 2 years with her friends, which now includes Mayo. I think Mayo is a decent enough character. She's really sweet but also very sheltered, which means she pairs well with Bocchi and Sotaka as they're all total airheads. It's also a really good sign of Bocchi's character arc. She needs her friends around when asking Mayo to become her friend, but she's able to talk with Mayo fairly well, even during their first real conversation, which happened while the two were alone. I mean, except for Mayo's butler. Bocchi also rides in Mayo's limousine, which leads to the very relatable moment of Bocchi having intense anxiety for just being around massive amounts of wealth, which leads us to the grand finale. Who will live? Who will die? Only time will tell. I mean, they all lived, but the school year is coming to an end. This episode feels weirdly paced compared to the others. It's a bunch of smaller stories rather than the typical A plot, B plot a lot of the episodes get. The first story is of Bocchi getting a smartphone. It leads to Bocchi gang's antics, which is fun. And I do think it's good the final episode spends time focusing on the Bocchi gang, just hanging out and being friends, as that's when the writing is often at its strongest. The next story is a conclusion of sorts to Kako's story, At the start, Kako gets very sick, and for whatever reason, that means her grumpy persona is just totally absent, and we get to see what Kako is actually like, which is still a bit introverted, but overall, she really is decent. She just read Atlas Falls one too many times or something. Next is the storyline about the last day of the first year of middle school, where Bocchi accidentally says that a third-year student is pregnant. But it's okay because Bocchi gets pancakes afterward with all of the friends she made throughout the year. Kai even makes a brief appearance to give Bocchi a new Promise Fairy toy. Then Bocchi says a line about how she was afraid to make friends, thinking life would be better without even trying. But she did it anyway, and that it's a wonderful thing that even someone like her can make friends. It's a really nice moment to end the show. I mean, the show doesn't actually end there. The show actually ends on the first day of the second year of school, with Bocchi barfing after having to introduce herself to the class, even though she's friends with like a third of everyone there. It kind of undercuts her arc right at the end, so we're all just going to focus a bit more on the first ending. So that was Hitori Bocchi. It's 12 episodes long, it's very cute, it's funny, it's relatable in a lot of small ways that not a lot of other shows capture. Like with Bocchi technically being an extrovert, just that she's very bad at it. I feel that. Is it my favorite anime of all time? No. And I sort of imagine it won't be for a lot of people who watch it. It does what it wants to do very well, but unfortunately 12 episodes just isn't enough. Not only does Bocchi never fulfill her promise to Kai, there's a lot more that could be explored with the Bocchi gang, especially Nako and Sodaka. From Nako's dream that she hints at but never explains, to the fact that Sodaka is technically living in Japan all by herself due to some family issues, which gets hinted at but never explained. I mean, it should say something that my biggest issue with the show is that there isn't more of it. But man, this show just wasn't built for 12 episodes. I imagine like 36 episodes would be perfect, 12 episodes per season, with one season per middle school year. But unfortunately, it's been over half a decade since this came out, so unless something crazy happens, 12 episodes it is destined to be. Still, I'm glad there's at least this much Hitori Bocchi. I really enjoyed the antics of the Bocchi gang, and it's nice focusing on such small scale problems, like a little girl not having enough friends. I'm not exactly an aficionado in the slice of life genre, which I believe this qualifies, but if the rest of them are like this, I should probably watch more. I mean, I do get why Stripe says this is his favorite anime. I mean, both he and Bocchi are autistic. Like, it's never said in the show that Bocchi has autism, but like, come on. I just spent the last however long detailing all her anxiety-ridden antics, from her being overly literal to not getting social cues and social roles a lot of the times. The only reason not to say she's autistic is because the show hasn't outright said it already. Also, autism is a spectrum, for sure, and I never knew Stripe while he was in middle school, but I imagine he was pretty much just like Bocchi. Again, the one thing I knew about the show going in is that Stripe was a lot like Bocchi, much to his own admittance. I'm a really big fan of representation in media, so I'm really glad my buddy was able to find an anime that made him feel seen. While I don't fully relate to his experience, I do still absolutely recommend giving the show a watch. It is such a lovely time, and I don't believe the spoilers I've spoiled are necessarily a detriment to the show, as the show really is just about being in the cutesy pastel moment. It's not really about the plot, it's watching an ever-growing group of friends that all truly feel like good friends. I mean, I watched through the show twice for the purposes of this video, and I enjoyed my watch through thoroughly both times, even if I couldn't find much to say about every individual episode. So with all that said and done, thank you for watching this episode. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe. And watch the Stripe the Squid YouTube channel. I recommend his videos on Godzilla shows, top 50 adult cartoons, and weird canceled cartoon pilots. And Stripe, I know you're watching, so I know what you're thinking. Oh, now that Robin has reviewed my favorite anime, it only makes sense for me to review Robin's favorite anime. That's what you sound like. So I've graciously decided to make your life easier and inform you that my favorite anime is, of course, Bizarreadvarks. So now you're socially obligated to make a detailed video on that show that is as long, or perhaps even longer than this video. Bye! I'm not joking about that Bizarre Dvarks video, though. I demand it.